listener production.
G'day, it's Rusty here, all set for part 2 of my podcast with F1 legend and Australian Motorsport Hall of Famer Alan Jones. Now, if you've landed on the grid here and not taken part in qualifying for part 1, jump back to the library and get into it. From the lessons his dad Stan taught him, making ends meet in the early years of F1 and how tough that was, making it to Formula 1 and winning the world title, plus Can-Am cars and a whole lot more. We begin part 2 by talking about his relationship with former F1 Supremo Bernie Ecclestone and a strategic play to miss a race in South Africa.
First of all, I love Bernie. I mean, Bernie gets shit-canned like you wouldn't believe. He has done some wonderful things for Formula 1. And Bernie is a man of his word, I can tell you. If Bernie shakes your hand, that is it. What happened was I fronted down to Kyalami for the South African Grand Prix, and when I arrived at the hotel and booked in, the bloke at the desk said, Mr. Ecclestone would like to see you in his suite or his penthouse, wherever he stayed. I said, shit, what have I done? And so I duly went up there, and he said, come in. And the first thing he said when I went in, he said, how do you feel? I said, yeah, fine. Why? He said, you don't look very well. This is typical Bernie. He has an unbelievable sense of humour. And I said, no, I feel all right. Why? And then he explained to me what was going on, that this Senator Jesse Jackson had threatened Beatrice. And when I used to drive the Beatrice, people had no idea who Beatrice was. I mean, it was the 8th largest company in America. I mean, it's bigger than BHP. It's huge. Anyway, Jackson said that if that car races in Kyalami, where I'm pulling every black person out of the workforce. As you can imagine, there was thousands of them. So then Beatrice shit themselves, of course, and didn't quite know what to do. They didn't want to be seen to be kowtowing to this individual, and they didn't want all their workforce to be pulled out, which would have cost them absolute millions. So typical Bernie, he's come up with a solution. He said, well, I guess if the driver gets crook and the car can't race, no one can win. I said, yeah, that sounds, yeah. He said, what are your chances of winning? I said, well, if I start now, it might be all right. Because, the car was dreadful. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, how about we give you first place? And no one knew, to this day, no one knows what Formula 1, the prize money is. And he said, you can wait until everyone goes to the circuit tomorrow, quietly check out, go home and spend a week or two with your family in Australia, and then just go back to England. And I thought, that sounds all right to me. I mean, because the car was very uncompetitive. So to me, that sounded like a really good deal. So that morning I waited until everyone went to the circuit, and I checked out, and Qantas being, then hypocrites, they wouldn't fly into South Africa because of the apartheid thing, but they knew damn well that people were flying from Johannesburg up to Harare and then getting on their flight to come home, which is what I did. So I flew up to Harare, stayed Saturday night there, I think it was, jumped on the plane the following morning and flew home. And then the press release was that I'd contracted this shocking virus and couldn't drive.
And great strategy from a Bernie sense to play the chess pieces in that manner. He is such a lateral thinker, and he is just. Someone said you've got to get up very early in the morning to beat Bernie. I said no, you just don't go to bed. He's an operator. Yeah. Another question from a fan here, Mark Jones. The best car that you ever drove and recollections of it, is that the car we reflected on before?
Oh, I'd have to say the 07, FW07B. There's certain cars that you hop into, and a 935 Porsche, believe it or not, was one of them. You hop into them and you just feel immediately at home. You feel comfortable. The ergonomics are there. It just feels good, And 9 times out of 10, that's how it turns out. It's like you very rarely see an ugly car in the winner's circle. And I just felt at home with the FW07. I could do anything with it. I mean, I felt pretty good in the 06 as well, and I probably prefer the 07 simply because it was more competitive. But that was by far and away my favourite car.
You also drove, in a one-off sense, the six-wheeler that they made. You went off and tested it. I think 4 wheels at the back, 2 at the front. What did you think of that car? I think you'd been to maybe Las Vegas the weekend before and jumped on a plane and went back over and tested that in Europe, didn't you?
Yeah, I was at Las Vegas, and I was lucky enough to win that Grand Prix. And Frank said, I want you to come back and drive the six-wheeler at Donington, because at that stage I'd told him that I wanted to knock it on the head. And I said, Frank, I don't want to go, mate. I just want to go home, It's and particularly at that time of the year, I knew that England would be freezing bloody cold. He said, come on, come back and have a drive it and see what you think. And I think he was hoping that I'd hop in it and think, this thing's a bit of a tool, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, to be honest, I didn't feel any difference at all. It's not like it had better grip. It's not like it had put its power. I just didn't feel any different. The only thing I felt was the bloody motorhome was freezing cold. I stayed at a motel where I had to put boiling water over the lock of the car so I could unlock it. And I'm thinking, this is all the reasons I want to go home, So that's what I did.
Had it been different? I mean, let's say some of that extraneous stuff that was, wearing you down, but had the car been competitive, might you have been tempted to change your mind?
Oh, I think so. I mean, like any driver, if you hopped in the thing and thought this is going to give me an unfair advantage, I'm down for a bit. It's like what you said at the beginning of this podcast, like, had we have had social media, in one respect, I hated it, but certainly if we would have had mobile phones and cable TV and things like that, I probably would have done another couple of years, because I know this sounds very stupid, but you'd go back to a hotel, particularly if you were doing testing at Rickard in winter, and you had to stop at 3 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock, because it was getting dark and cold and everything. So you'd go back to the room. I was never a big book reader. So, what do you do? Had I been able to put on cable TV or jump on the mobile phone and talk to my mates, I'm sure that would have given me a bit more encouragement to stay on for another couple of years. But they're the little things that wear you down. Like, you've got to go down to the foyer, give the bloke a piece of paper with the phone number that you want to call in Australia, sit on a couch while he tells you to go into booth number 3. It's all that. That used to get me down.
Was there a class of racing? I mean, you mentioned the Porsche there before and so on. Was there a class of racing, a couple of fans have asked, that you would have liked to have done more of, or perhaps tried that you didn't get into?
Well, I tried IndyCar. That was bloody. I hated that. I like racing the Porsche. I did Le Mans twice in a Porsche and a Toyota. Look, I've got to say that my first and only love was Formula One, because I was always, they're bred for a purpose, they're designed for a purpose. Everything else is modified. And whilst I say all that, I like driving the Can-Am car. I really enjoyed that, because that had a heap of downforce, and America's got some great circuits. I mean, Road Atlanta, Laguna Seca. I mean, it's got some fabulous circuits. I look at some of the circuits America's got, and I look at some of the circuits we've got, Winton, some of those circuits, Winton International, and they're shocking. They're just dreadful little go-kart tracks in the middle of paddocks. Like Phillip Island's really good. Bathurst is really good, although not suitable, for a powerful open wheeler. But we have very few really good circuits, whereas America's got a heap of them. And I used to love racing there.
It's a dangerous game, and there are moments perhaps where you cheat death, or you what was the worst crash for you? The one that sticks in your mind?
You sound like the managing director's wife at a dinner party. They always used to ask me those questions, and depending on how pissed I was, or how bloody, or how nasty I wanted to be, I used to say, "Oh well, I had my arm ripped off once," and But
you never worried about the danger of it. This is clearly what you're talking about here, did you? Ever?
No, I didn't really. No, because at the beginning of the year, I'd make sure all my insurance was in order. I had all the best equipment I could get in terms of clothing and all that sort of stuff. I made sure that my wife and Christian and everything was all organised if anything ever happened, and just got on with it. Yeah, I mean, that's not to say I didn't sort of get scared or apprehensive on the odd occasion. Like there was the odd, but I never used to get the butterflies all that much. Every now and again I would, and I wouldn't even know why. You'd be there saying, "Shit, what am I doing here?" But 9 times out of 10, I didn't know. I used to just, I had stupid little what's the word? When you
superstitions.
Superstitions, yeah. I mean, strangely, I used to like seeing an ambulance before the race, the start of the race.
Really?
Yeah, and I used to say stupid things like ambulance. Now, don't ask me what all that's about. Okay. And maybe it was just a distraction, way of, and the red underpants, of course, and hopping in from the left-hand side of the car. So there was all that nonsense going on, but otherwise, no, not really.
Pretty significant sliding doors moment. Am I right in saying you were meant to be on the plane with Graham Hill too when he passed away? You were meant to be going testing, and that changed at the last minute maybe or something?
Yeah, I was. They had designed a brand new car, and they were going down to Paul Ricard, because that's where most people went for testing at that time of the year in England, because the chances of it being dry, were a lot better than anywhere else. And they could drive the transporter there. They didn't have to fly anything. So I was meant to be going down there to drive the new car, and I was having a party at my place in Highgate in London, and I had a phone call from John, who worked for Marlborough. He said, "Oh, AJ," he said, because you hear all the noise in the background, he said, "You at a party?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, mate, Graham Hill's just been killed with Tony Bryce and everybody." And he could have knocked me down with a feather, because Tony Bryce, brilliant young up-and-coming driver, the Australian designer, and Graham. I flew back from the Nurburgring with Graham, and I'll never forget it, because I'd got 5th, which was their best result so far. And he said, "Oh, come back with me," which I did, and completely shitting myself the whole way. Because you'd say, "Oh, Graham, there's a 707 just over there." I was like, "Oh, thanks for that." He was just, he let's just say I don't think he paid as much attention to his aviation as he did his motor racing. Okay. And what happened was, it's a common story, that they'd parked all their cars where he kept the plane, and they advised him to go on up to the next vet, and he said, "No, I know this place like the back of my hand," and he hadn't altered the altimeter to suit the different whatever you got to do, and literally just flew into the side of the mountain and killed a lot of them. And I could very well have easily been on that plane, because they rung me up the last minute and said, "AJ, don't worry about coming down to Ricard, Tony Bryce is going to do it." Sure. I said, "Yeah, okay." Sure. So there you go.
Yeah. You talked about that 5th place result there a moment ago. That was Nurburgring, and I think you came from like 22nd or 21st to get that result, which was mighty. You would then go on later on to win at Hockenheim, the German Grand Prix, both classic, legendary tracks. What was it like back in that era to try and be fast around those joints?
Well, Hockenheim was obviously a lot easier than Nurburgring. I mean, Hockenheim's a pretty straightforward sort of a circuit. It's bloody quick. Particularly that east curve, or whatever they used to call it.
We miss that now, I reckon.
Yeah, well, we miss a lot of things, don't we? Putting these silly bloody chicanes everywhere. But the Nurburgring was something else. I mean, that was just unbelievable. I don't think you could ever know that place intimately. I don't think you could ever do enough laps. In fact, I went there about a week or 4 or 5 days early and hired a BMW. I won't say the hire car company, because they might still be after me. And at the where you start the laps, they used to charge 5 Deutschmark, and so I used to do as many laps as I can, just trying to work out,
just kept buying tickets all day.
Well, I did, yeah, and because there's certain landmarks that are famous now, like you come over a blind brow of the hill, and when you see this white chapel, you know that there's a right-hander immediately after it, and all that nonsense, So I'd been going around, and at where you buy your tickets and where you queue up to go onto the circuit, you get all these people that want to come in and ride with you. Yeah. And that was all right. This young bloke kept on asking, "Can I come?" No, mate, no. I just didn't really know what I was I didn't know where I was going myself. Anyway, when I thought I'd sufficiently got to know it a little bit, I said, "Yeah, righto, mate, jump in. Come on, we're right." And I got about halfway around and shunted it into the Armco. And glass was breaking and shit was flying everywhere. He was screaming, never to be seen again. He jumped out and disappeared like a rabbit. And then I had to wait. Then I didn't quite know what to do. So James was doing the same thing, and Donahue was doing the same thing. And so...
James Hunt, Mark Donoghue.
Yeah, I flagged them down and said, Jesus, mate, like, what am I going to do here? But there was a break in the Armco because it's such a long circuit that they put a break so you can drag the car off the circuit. And where that happens is like little huts where the marshals can either stay overnight or have their get lunch or whatever. So we decided to wait until evening, dark, and then we got the car off the track. And then we decided to wait till evening, and then they came around. I think it was James or somebody towed me, or I drove it. It was crabbing. Like, no, it was rooted. And drove it out of the circuit onto the road, got about 25 k's up the road.
Oh, gee, appears to have had an accident.
Well, no, bloody deer.
Oh.
Bloody deer jumped out on me. And so James drove me back to the hotel, and I rang up and said, oh, look, shocking, one of your wildlife. Yeah. And they said, well, is the deer hurt? And I said, no, very fortunate. I was able to swerve and miss him. Anyway, the car was completely rooted. Anyway, they gave me a replacement one, which I thought was damn decent of them. Yep. But no, that was a funny day overall.
Best form of defence is attack, don't they say? One here from, what have we got here? Sorry, this is a couple of questions from listeners. Lucas McKentry says, the 3 quickest F1 drivers that you raced against. Did you ever think about that stuff, or was it always just about you and trying to be the fastest and not think about the opposition?
Yes, well, that's true. I did. I mean, if I saw somebody in front of me, like if you saw a Ferrari, you'd think, oh, well, it's either Villeneuve or it's Scheckter or somebody. You wouldn't dwell on that fact. I mean, to me, they were just a thing to be passed, an object. There's a car, and I had to get past it. Obviously, you put it in your mind. I mean, they call it telemetry now. We had telemetry in our helmets. You'd say, well, okay, there's whatever. He's hard to pass. I mean, Villeneuve, when you passed Villeneuve, you earned it. He would never give you room.
You could tell straight away, helmet colour, you knew who it was.
Absolutely, and you'd think, oh, here we go, we're going to rub wheels or something here, because he's just not going to give way. Because with all due respect, I loved him, and he was unbelievable, but he was never, ever going to die in bed, I tell you. When you look back and see the amount of shunts that he's had, and he used to do some very silly things, like rubbing wheels unnecessarily. I mean, I don't mind rubbing wheels. I mean, I'm all for it. But like at Zandvoort, for instance, when he went off and tore the back left-hand wheel off, the only thing that was hanging on was the brake lining. And he drove it all the way around the circuit back to the paddock like that. Now, of course, most of the Italians and a lot of people think, oh, Gilles, yeah, fantastic, what a hero and blah, blah. I reckon I told him, I said, you're a bloody idiot, mate. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, I could have been coming up behind you, that brake line could have snapped, and that wheel could have come back and hit me and killed me. So I just think you're a dick. But Gilles, he just rub his shoulders, shrug his shoulders, off he'd go, which is fine, because in those days we all made our own arrangements, like even to the extent where it has been known for other people to do brake testing. If they got a bit dirty with somebody, if they thought somebody had done something wrong, they'd give them a bit of brake test. Because we had a certain thing about being old enough to look after yourself and not be body coddled by FIA and bloody managers and makeup artists and Christ knows what. So, but Gilles was a hard man to pass. Ronnie Peterson was a quick driver. Andretti actually was he wasn't underrated. He was one of Mario Andretti is probably one of the true legends of motorsport. I mean, that guy can drive anything. NASCAR, sports car, you name it. Mario, not only could he drive it, he was super competitive, yeah. And I feel very fortunate to have raced against a lot of those sort of guys.
Let's see how my pronunciation is for some of these F1 greats. Jacques Villeneuve. French-Canadian isn't my strong suit, sorry Jacques. Michael Schumacher. Pretty good. Lewis Hamilton. Easy peasy. Ayrton Senna. My personal favourite, but let's try that again. Ayrton. There we go.
A couple to finish here, maybe in the touring car landscape, if you don't mind. Mark Osler, a broadcast colleague of mine who you would have known from the Channel 7 days, he told me this great story about you taking him on a hot lap of Bathurst in the Sierra. And he reckons you came out of the pit lane, you looked across at him, and you stuck it in fourth. And the car laboured and then all of a sudden the turbo came to life, and he said the thing was unbelievable. What were those Sierras like back in the day?
They were shocking little things. I mean, they were undertired.
Yep.
They had nothing off 600 horsepower, and as Mark told you, you'd put your foot down, there'd be about a 9-hour lag. So they were just nasty things to drive, and anyone who says they were fun or they were good is a masochist. But having said that, there was nothing else around that could beat them because they were that bloody quick. But I remember I put it on the front row of the grid. Tony Longhurst and myself did exactly the same times to get on the front row of the grid. But Frank Gardner didn't like the fact that I was on the front row of the grid with the person that he was actually working for. So we found a mechanical problem with my car not long before the pit lane opened. So I had to wait in the pit lane until they fixed the mechanical problem, and then had to take up my spot on the rear of the grid. Frank was good, I tell you. But yeah, they were a challenging little thing. The very first time I ever drove one was at a circuit that I never particularly liked, just outside of Sydney, little amphitheatre covered.
Amaroo Park?
Amaroo Park. Go-kart track. And anyway, I whacked it on pole. But of course, I wasn't quite used to the fact that the bloody tyres would wear out in about 0.3 of a second, because they had that much bloody horsepower that they'd wheel spin and carry on, and they were under-tyred anyway. But no, they were a challenge.
Yeah. How do you frame the Bathurst chapter? You reflected on it being such a legendary circuit before and great place to drive. It would have been nice to have ticked that one, wouldn't it?
It would, as Gracie keeps on telling me, open wheelers are for Sheilas. And you might have won the World Championship, mate, but you haven't won Bathurst. My only claim to fame is I got second, and I won the 12-hour, but I haven't won the big one, see? So, you're nothing. So, yeah, but I mean, I like Bathurst. I mean, I won't pretend I look forward going there, because I don't think anyone would like to... You wouldn't voluntarily go to Bathurst. It's like I went to Malala one year to test the Falcon, and I went into the local shop at the village, and she said, "You're Alan Jones?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I just come here for my holidays. I come here annually, bring the kids with the caravan." And she said, "Oh, really? What do you like about it?" I mean, hello. So you can have fun sometimes.
I love your sense of humour, mate. It's never left you, which is great. You and I actually got to work together very briefly at Channel 9. We did a race at Eastern Creek, the motorcycle GP there, and we called the support races. Great chapter for you there with the late Darryl Eastlake and Baz, who's now gone as well, and it really helped Formula One go next level in terms of its exposure to this country, didn't it?
Well, Barry and Daz, I mean, they were bloody characters. Daz was a bloody dag. Barry, well, what do you say about Barry? I mean, I used to fly back after a broadcast with Barry on the Monday morning, and in the end, I used to invent stories about why I couldn't share a car with him, because he'd hop straight back in the cab and light up one of those rotten gulwars that he used to smoke. And of course, smoking a gulwar wasn't enough for Barry. He had to go and buy one with filters, because they were stronger than the non-filtered ones. Then he'd bite the filter off and spit it out the window and light her up. Well, of course, the cab driver would blow up. And Barry said, "Oh, mate, don't worry, mate, I've got the window down." So, Barry, why do we have to go through this every bloody trip? Like, I'm a nervous wreck by the time I get home. So in the end, I used to say, "Mum, mate, I can't, I've got something in Tweed Heads. I've got to go pick up a step-over toe hold somewhere or whatever." Just pay my own way home rather than put up with the crap. But no, he was a unbelievable character, and of course Daz, well, I mean, he'd make a snail race sound exciting.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you know this story, but before I started working in the media, I won a little competition on radio to go for a hot lap with someone. You were driving for Glenn Seaton at the time, so my first ever ride in any V8 supercar was with you.
No.
Yeah, it was. True story. And I walked into the garage at Eastern Creek, and there was a very nervous lady who was also a competition winner, and a gentleman who was probably a little on the larger side, and you looked at the three of us and you pointed straight at me and you said, "You're first." And I went, "Okay."
Because you were thin.
I was thin.
I hate taking fat people for rides. Because, really, even when I'm doing hot laps for the car company that I used to represent, which I won't mention their name because I don't represent them anymore, you know, I used to like the little Japanese girls because you wouldn't even know they're in the car. But you'd get some fat bloke in the car and it really would upset the balance. It'd make it understeer or do something. So, sorry, I just...
No, but the conclusion to the story is we're trundling down pit lane. It's my first sort of eye-opening moment of, you know, the rattle and noise of a supercar. And you looked across at me and you sort of shouted over the noise and you said, right, we're on old tyres and they're cold and you're the first one of the day. And you just gassed it out of the pit lane. The thing was more or less sideways by the time we got to turn 2. Mate, it was awesome. And it was a very vivid recollection for me of the kind and style of racer you are. I mean, you just grabbed that thing by the scruff of the neck and hustled it.
Well, once again, I don't know how to explain this, but that's why Patrick always used to get me to test the car, because I'm a big believer in when you've got the bum in the car, you just give it all the time. It doesn't matter whether you're testing or racing or whatever. And if we used to go testing, there's no point driving at 8 tenths or anything, because when you go back to the race and you drive at 10 tenths, it becomes a different animal. So if you get into it and give it heaps all the time, and a racing driver is a bit like a pianist, you know, the only instrument you've got is the piano. So you don't sit down at the piano and not play it well. Every time you sit down, you should be playing it well to practice. Yeah. So every time I put my bum in a car, I always try and, except sometimes I must admit that, you know, if I'm taking punters around on a corporate day, you know, you always back off a little bit, because that would be rather embarrassing to stick it in with the CEO or something next to you.
Speaking of instruments, there is a guitar in the corner of the room here. I mean, I was staggered when I walked in today. Are you doing a little bit of playing?
Oh, it's for effect.
Ambiance.
I'm bloody hopeless. You know, I'm all thumbs. I'd love to be able to play it, but every now and again I pick it up and have a bit of a practice, and I get bored and I get angry with myself and throw it away, put it back in the corner.
Two to finish. One person has asked about, in relation to your V8 chapter, a very memorable weekend at Symmons Plains, and you were battling with Scafie, and Scafie ran around. I think you battled with Wayne Gardner as well, and it was pretty decent, heated conversation between you and Mark in the pit lane. Did time heal that, and what was said? Can you remember what was said at the time when you had that confrontation, the pair of you?
Not really, but I just do remember coming out of the hairpin, and I was right up his backside, and he backed off a little bit. And of course, going into that back straight from Symmons Plains, you can't afford to back off because you lose your momentum. So I kept it in, and must have run up his arse or done something. I don't know, I don't care. And off he went and spun around, to which he took a bit of hombrage to, which that's his entitlement. I don't give a damn. And of course, with Wayne, it was the left-hander coming out of the left-hander after the straight. Yep. And I think he tried to go around the outside of me or something, and I wasn't having anything to do with that. So I just kept my foot in it, and we touched, and he went off. So it was a bit of a memorable day. I had two of them off.
Final one, and I know in the balance of it all, you probably are a little not disappointed, but probably would have done it differently. There is a funny story about you, the Beatrice Lola, the pilot, the plane, and you basically had him on standby, good to go, because you knew it was going to be a pretty ordinary race, didn't you?
Well, more than standby. I told him to go and get some sandwiches and get some fresh, and go and get some cold beer. As I said to you at the beginning of this, I'll give 100% if they give 100%. And if someone can prove to me that they've done their best and they've given me a 100% car, I will honestly give 100%. But if I think it's a complete wank and a waste of time, I won't. It's as simple as that. And Beatrice got me to the stage, quite frankly, where I just hated the thing. I mean, the actual chassis wasn't a bad chassis, but...
You were just light years behind in power terms, weren't you?
Well, it was just a joke. I mean, the Americans would say, you know, from Ford, you're going to see American muscle at its best. Yeah, good on you. It wouldn't pull the skin off a rice pudding. And we went to Monza, 15 Ks or more, slower down the straight than the Ferraris. I went and got Keith Duckworth. I said, Keith, look, mate, that's slow down. They're passing me like I'm parked. He said, oh, well, you're running too much wing. Oh, please. No, Keith, no, I haven't. Oh, geez, I haven't thought of that. So I told him to come up and have a look. Our rear wing was almost flat. The Ferraris looked like a barn door on the back. And they were that much quicker, it was a joke. So anyway, I was sick of all this bullshit. So we flew down to Portugal. I had my own plane at that stage. So I just said, listen, I'm sick of this shit. I'll just see how it goes in practice, but if it's the same old crap, just go and get some beer, get some sandwiches, get her all warmed up. And I'm not particularly proud of this, but by the same token, I'd probably do it again. I picked a spot conveniently right behind the pitch, the paddock, which was a hairpin and a nice big gravel runoff area. So, gee whiz, I locked up my brakes and skidded into the bloody gravel. Couldn't be retrieved. So I had to hop out and go back to the motorhome, get changed and get in the car and go to the airport and go home. And we were back home in time to go to our favourite Chinese restaurant in Chiswick. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I did that. And, you know, I mean, it happens from time to time. I mean, it's not as bad as what Nicky did. I mean, Nicky went to the Race of Champions at Riverside and they paid us pretty good dough to go there. And Nicky went there on the basis that they paid for his Learjet to be re-instrumentated, blah, blah, blah. And he got in, and I think the first thing he would do, clutched the thing at about 90,000 revs and blew the shit house out of it, and then said, right, instruments are all ready, straighten the Learjet home.
Oh, right.
But, I mean, I love Nicky. I mean,
we miss him, don't we?
Oh, mate. They all called him now the professor, or what do they call him? But Prost is called that. But they used to call Nicky. Anyway, but Nicky loved a beer. He liked the odd cigarette. You know, he actually, the bloke that used to come and wash his cars, rather than pay him money, Nicky'd give him one of his trophies. So that's, you know, he was a really down-to-earth. I really loved Nicky. He was a good bloke.
It's been great to shoot the breeze with you, mate, and I'm sure there's a gazillion more stories. It's been very kind of you to spend this time. And from everyone, congrats on what you've done, and I'm really thrilled, mate, that you'll be with Channel 10 this weekend, and this coming weekend for the Grand Prix, I should say, and also that you're at our home race and we're celebrating the 1980 World Champion, because that's the right thing.
Well, I might have been able to get a ticket from them. Who knows? Had a bit of trouble so far.
Rusty's Garage is written and presented by me, Greg Rust. Series editor and producer is Ed Gooden. Audio production by Darcy Thompson. If you've got a guest suggestion, get in touch with me via social media. The Garage. It's where a journey begins with a tank full of passion-fueled stories.
Listener.